Hello, welcome to another episode of Shaman Radio Presents. And my very special guest today is Juliana Sloane, Sloane. And you have a website of the same name, right? So easy to
That's
find.
true. And you seem to have already known everybody misspells it.
Well, I thought I should read it out because if people are just listening to this, they're going to want to look you up for sure. Because you have a really wonderful and unique blend of expertise that I appreciate. I've always sought. And I'll just kind of go over your bio here for people. Basically, you're a hypnotherapist, coach, and Buddhist meditation teacher who works with sensitive, high-functioning clients seeking inner transformation through modalities like depth hypnosis, shamanic journey work, and mindfulness, all deeply rooted in evidence-based neuroscience and psychospiritual practice. You bring a strong academic background as well with an MA in gender studies from Central European University and a BA in religious and women's studies from Guilford College. Additionally, you're a certified depth hypnosis practitioner and applied shamanic practitioner, both credentials earned at the foundation of the Sacred Stream, where you're also an ordained minister. And you serve as a community Dharma leader at Spirit Rock Meditation Center. Your practice centers around helping people safely and gently shift their consciousness to address trauma, anxiety, chronic illness, offering tools that have changed your life and the lives of your clients in deep ways. And you seems like you have a really nice following, thousands of spiritual seekers and individuals interested in wellness, mindfulness, and personal growth. So welcome. I'm truly honored to have you here. You really combine all the things that I've sought personally as well to combine. I collaborated with a hypnotherapist for many years, still do to some extent, named Dylan Rumley. She was out of the South Bay area, I believe, for the most part. Now I think moved to Virginia or something. So, but I've always been a huge fan. I think it's, when I've done my shamanic work with people, I give them homework and I encourage them to go seek, more deep psychospiritual work, right? Because it's critical. So I really am going to enjoy this conversation with you and sharing all your wisdom and expertise with anyone who's listening. So thank you for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me, John. It's really fun to be able to be here and connect in this way.
Yeah, thank you. And so tell me a little bit about how you really got started. Where go, as far back as you want to go, because I know mine started like at birth, right?
Oh, totally, totally.
So,
You know,
so
I
let's
think
hear your story.
I love this because honestly, I think I often will get that question. And so often, we have these neatly packaged little narratives of, well, I was an executive and then I burnt out and then I discovered this after going to Bali. And really the truth for me is much more like what you're sharing, that much of this has been from day one. I mean, we could go way back. I was born almost 12 weeks early. So I actually spent the first few months of my life in an incubator in the NICU. So my sense from the work that I have done is even from that point, there is something there in walking in liminal spaces, in being between the world of the living and non-ordinary reality. So I'm sure that in some ways from day one there's been something there. I remember being a little kid, and I was an only child, so yeah, I spent a lot of time alone. I was always really sensitive, pretty spiritually inclined, and I remember sitting with my thoughts one day and I closed my eyes. I was just looking at the sort of play of color and shape on the closed eyelids. And all of a sudden I started seeing like, oh, thoughts just sort of bubble up from nothing. I can latch onto them and make them stronger. I can let them go and they just sort of transform into nothing. And I remember being so excited. I ran down into the kitchen and I found my mom and I said, Mom, I know where thoughts came from. I just discovered where thoughts came from.
That's amazing. I love that.
And
Love that.
she was a busy person. I don't think she completely understood that I had just had this very profound meditative experience. But in some ways, I would say there's always been this curiosity and this leaning. Those roots have been there for a very long time.
And where did you grow up?
I
Where
grew
did
up in
you?
Pennsylvania, outside
It
of
was in
Philadelphia.
Pennsylvania.
I
Cool.
was, so fortunate to be deep in nature, surrounded by forests and creeks. And there was something in that too. I was very lucky to have a very strong connection to nature from the beginning. But, as I aged, as we all do, we walk this path of how do I combine the kind of sensitive, spiritual component of who I am, the creative, wacky, whatever it is, with what I'm told I'm supposed to be as a high functioning, high achieving
Right.
grown up. And I would say for me, honestly, all of these practices really got cooking in that phase. I had dabbled in a lot of spiritual practices in my teens and early 20s, but when I went out into the working world, I suppressed a lot of that, quite honestly,
Sure. Yeah.
and, tried to force myself to fit into a particular kind of box. Probably not so surprisingly, events coalesced. I experienced a significant trauma. I was approaching burnout in a high stress leadership job. It was all sort of coming to a head. And I realized, I have to live for more than just what the boxes I've been told I'm supposed to tick. There has to be more to this. And so much of that really found me going back to those spiritual, sensitive, creative roots. First with getting back into Buddhist practice, which I'd stepped away from, really deeply dedicating myself to study of meditation, Buddhist psychology, Buddhist wisdom. And then, I
How
got
old were you then?
mid to late 20s,
Yeah. Okay. It's about the same
approaching the
time
Saturn
yeah.
return,
Yeah. That's
that kind
great.
of age. And
Yeah.
so really dove back in hard. I'd had some experiences when I was a teenager that I had been ready to like totally give myself over to spiritual practice, and some real disillusionment and harm in a spiritual community took place. So I had really shied away from it for a period of time, but I at that point dove back in because the sense was, if I don't do this now, when am I going to do this? This is clearly what I've been wanting my whole life. So, over the
Yeah.
years, it's really been a deepening in that. I fell into shamanic practice a little bit accidentally. The irony of this is that I have a parent who has a shamanic practice, and
Oh.
part of my individuation process was I'm going to
Right.
go do Buddhism over here.
Right.
You
Not
can go
gonna
do
do
your
that.
shamanic stuff over there. And, of course it came and found me.
Yeah, I love that. It's neat. You kind of touched on an interesting point because the neat thing about shamanism to me, regards to all these other spiritually, potentially oriented, even nature-based things that are out there in all these different communities and what have you, is that it's eminently practical and pragmatic. The whole point of shamanism is it's not about getting out there. It's about how do you improve the quality of life right here, right now. So it's super grounded. And I love that you were in that part of the world because I've always found the East Coast all up and down to be, and I was born and raised in California. But man, the rocks there, which share the rocks with Scotland, that whole range that they talk about are just super conducive to to both grounding and being able to sort of journey and into the, into the non-physical. And so I think it's wonderful that you had all those influences and you got born there and you were obviously eager to get going on this path coming that early. I came in 2 weeks early. I thought that was a big deal. 12 weeks is so, you know, I just wanted to, mention that, because of that shamanic sort of what you were surrounded by and how you noticed some things that were messy with a lot of other things. And we know that the training, if you get good training, it's all about doing your personal work, getting your stuff out of the way and dialed, right? So you're not healing through your clients, right? You got to get yours done
Absolutely.
as much as possible first. And then to stay grounded and to stay protected and to be, as impeccable as you can be with this when the veil is thin. And so I think you've had a tremendous background in that. And I love the gender studies. And because this has always been about, for me at least, and my teachers, the return of the feminine, right? That the real solution is to get that flipped, as my tarot teachers would say, the Pachacuti, to get it flipped right side up again, so that the feminine is essentially in charge within us, at least, and ideally in a lot of the big decisions being made in the world, if we want to have a sustainable, more better quality life, I think. So I just love that. When I read that, I just thought, oh, you're so dialed with all of the important things. And I love that your background is so solid and that you were discerning, that you were able to see that messy part is not where you want to go. It's not about taking off into that part of but you're grounded, you're professional, you're clearly able to hold space. So I just wanted to appreciate that about you and let people know that's important. Like that's probably one of the most important things. When you're doing work, you're dropping into an altered state, no matter what you're doing. And some people think, oh, this is all plant medicine. No, obviously most of it isn't. That's fine in some cases for certain things. But regardless, whether it's just a session, hypnotherapy session, psychology session, shamanic energy medicine session, plant medicine, whatever, journeying of any kind, the person holding the space is 99% of what's important to just keep it clean, keep it
Yeah.
safe. Because you don't do that. My teachers say it would throw you back in your journey years. You've done all this progress, you get into a funky space and you get out there. Now you're just, God knows what can happen. So,
Absolutely. And I love that you're sort of bringing this all to the fore, actually, because it is so, so deeply interwoven in a lot of the work that I do.
yeah,
Part of my path in this life has, for better or for worse, to have seen and experienced places where in spiritual community things get weird around relationship to
yeah,
power, especially around how, gender dynamics play
yeah,
out, the
yeah,
influences of patriarchy, and, all of it. And so a lot of the work that I have done over the years, it's part of why I also lead, a women's meditation group, women's retreats, is also working with people who've experienced, along the spectrum of harm in spiritual community so that there can be a space to recover that power, recover that sense of agency, and come back into the knowing that, there is no external source who is going to grant you permission, grant you access to spirit, to insight, to the sacred. Like that is something that happens within each one of us. And of course, we want to have guides who are ethical, who are grounded, who've taken care of their own stuff, who hold a clear space. And knowing that from that point on, it's really all about our own connection to spirit, our own connection to what lies beyond the veil. And that it is so important for each one of us to be empowered to have that agency. It's part of why so much of the work that I do actually is working with clients one on one to teach them the shamanic journey and use the shamanic journey as a counseling modality, because it also places that power in their hands. That, you know, I'm not the person coming in and saying I'm going to heal you. I'm the person coming in and saying, like, okay, we're going to partner together, we're going to collaborate, I'm going to help you get the tools you need so that you can get that insight, get that grounding, take that personal responsibility, heal what needs to be healed. But, you know, the ownership of that is on you. And
Yeah.
it's part of what I love about shamanic practice, which you framed so beautifully, of like, yeah, this is about accepting responsibility first and foremost for the work we're here to do.
Totally. Yeah. And, every time there's humans involved, it's messy. I mean, I don't care what organization, what anything, community, anything you're talking about, right? People are largely wounded, and they're all the interactions associated with that. And you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So number one, you don't want to give anyone your power. Number one, there is nobody above you. Even if they call themselves a guru, or the Buddha or the Pope or the monk, or and they've developed a kind of position in an organization, they're still not above you or better than you or have any power over you. So it's so important. Yeah, a psychic, even you go to see a psychic, you get a reading, or you throw the tarot cards, or really anything. You go to church, you always have to maintain that knowledge that it's between you and source, and you and nature. They can help you, they can give you ideas, guide you, what have you, but um, keeping your power is what it's all about, all the time. And so those lessons come out all the time, right? And you do have to not confuse the message with the messenger, which is another thing people do, right? And
Absolutely.
we have this concept, no praise, no blame, in our training, because John, someone, oh, John, that session was amazing and you're so great, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm glad it worked. I was just a witness, basically. So no praise. I did not, don't praise me. That way
Absolutely.
also, if it's like, hey, I didn't feel anything, it didn't work at all, you're a complete fraud, you're horrible, that you also don't take that blame, right? Because it's like, I don't have that power over you. I will show up, do my thing, best I can, give you things to do on your own, ideally, that you can do a lot of, and then you know, it's up to them to continue to do their work, right? And so I love that you brought that up, because I think that's such an important part of this, right? I mean, like you said, even if you went through something really horrible in any part of your life, and particularly in a spiritual setting or a healing setting, the whole concept of the soul retrieval and PTSD and the victim perpetrator rescuer trap is, don't get stuck in that. you know take the pain, take the lesson, whatever, chalk it up to discernment, or maybe that person does need to, like, be like taken out of this because they're that bad, or whatever, they shouldn't be doing this or whatever. But more importantly is that going forward, right, you're still in your power, not the victim, not the perpetrator, right? You're the creator of your
Exactly.
experiences, and
Exactly.
ideally, and pain happens, bad stuff happens. That's part of, I don't know. How does that, I wanted to ask you, how, having said all that, because I think a lot of people I don't know, I'm sure with you, with my work over the years, people constantly trying to reconcile their spiritual practice, their religion, their belief systems, with something like shamanism, with something like I would do. And my favorite thing is to be a bridge, whether it's as a shaman to a a technocrat type person who like you know doesn't believe in any of this. I've always been able to bridge it in a way that makes sense. I've always been able to take anyone from any religion and go, we don't have to go against you. We could use you. This supports your religion. We're not we're going to use your religion to do this work, and it's worked beautifully. It doesn't make a difference. I was raised Catholic. I'm still very Christian. I've been really on a kick about how important, more than ever, that seems to be right now. This sort of spiritual warfare that seems to be happening. I'm always in the unknown and the unknowable personally, right? Like I don't know why I do half the things I do, but eventually it sort of becomes clear. So I'm humble in that way. Like I will be like, I don't know why, but I'm getting back to the Catholic Church right now, and it seems weird, but I guess we'll see. But the point being that um and I've had people who are Christians in my family and stuff and Catholic and stuff go, John, when you do the shamanism stuff, that's evil. You're not talking about Jesus, da 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 da. And why don't you just do that? Why don't you just go talk about Jesus and stuff? And I go, well, first of all, I don't preach to the choir. My job is not to share information in my work with people who are already there. I'm here to bridge. I'm here to take someone who knows nothing about this and or nothing about Jesus for that matter, and get and kind of walk with them for a while and go, and by the way, Jesus is really good at keeping away these negative energy. So I've always been that. And I think that can get misunderstood. People go, no, that's not what you're doing or this. And it's like, have you had these experiences? Have you personally tried to reconcile all the things, Buddhism and shamanism or any other practice? And what's your experience with all that?
Yeah,
Where are you with
yeah,
that?
absolutely. It's interesting. There's a couple of different things that are coming up as you're sharing. And, one is, I think for a lot of us, there is often a hesitancy of how much of myself, of this sort of magic, of the non ordinary, am I going to share? Because we are walking this line these days between, this deep, mystic, profound experience and living in a culture that has such incredible leanings on material science, on evidence, on all of this. And so, there's something there. And I think especially for, as a woman, being with this legacy of witch burnings across the century and all of that, there can be
Right.
such a layer of fear in many of the women that I have worked with as clients or students or walked alongside on this path. And so there is something there of how do we actually bridge these two worlds. There are so many interesting pieces of information though that are coming out more and more. One study from the University of Michigan recently, a couple of years back, showed that shamanic journey work using the drum can be just as, which, okay, you and I know this already, just as
Totally.
powerful, if not more powerful, in terms of experiences of insight and oneness and, spiritual inspiration as plant medicine. So there is evidence that points to this. When I think about the spiritual side of things, how do I reconcile Buddhism and shamanism? Really when it comes down to it, in so many ways, the Buddha was a shaman. He was
Right. That's
working with
awesome. Yeah.
energy. He
So
was
true.
having visions of past lives. He was working with the devas and the tree spirits and the energy of the land. that was part of the culture of that time. There was an animistic culture that was flowing through everything. Same I would say goes for Christianity, goes for other religions. Part of this is about what gets left out of those canonical texts or what
True,
gets sort
so
of
true.
glossed
Yeah,
over in little ways. But, if we really look into the history of religions, every movement was started by some kind of a visionary seeker who had a mystical experience. And part of that mystical experience over and over and over seems to point us also towards compassion and towards taking care of all people, all beings, including those who are most marginalized. We see the same themes over and over and over of like what is most holy and what is most sacred. And at the heart of it, it seems to be the mystic experience and it seems to be love.
beautiful. Yes, I love that. It makes sense. And yeah, even my teacher wrote a book about Patanjali, right? The Yoga Sutra, the originator of what we know as yoga today, essentially in all of its many forms as a shaman. I mean, and I think I've written an article or two about Jesus as a shaman. And yeah, I think that's really beautifully put. And you're right, it comes down to even the questions, which are now such a big thing. But for me, 30 years ago, it was so fringe, but it's like, the UFO and the alien and the ancient alien theories and are angels really are aliens, are aliens angels, like, and that's like now it's happening, like now people are seeing these things everywhere. There's this Chris Bledsoe I've been sharing with people that's beautiful. Talk about love. I mean, this guy, you watch him talk and what he went through with his family, and he's like the go-to sort of in fact, I'm going to go see him in Sedona coming up here for the first time. Where in person he takes groups and then they go out, and he just has this connection with these beings, and orbs show up in the sky. And in one case, it had a face, and he took a picture of this and shared it of his son who had passed away at age 4 in the orb, and his dog. And so like this whole concept of spirits, and in shamanism we understand like the spirit, when we go non-physical, passes into the eighth chakra, the sort of, they call it the Viracocha in Quechua, and then that ball of light goes dancing across the mountains when somebody dies. And it's like now they're capturing these on film, and they're showing up for way more people, so it's like all coming finally to like everybody's talking about it, even on the news and stuff. And I think it really ties in with what you said, and how, you know, bottom line is all these things are probably all speaking of the same thing. you know, from one culture to another, one time period of another, one interpretation to another. Um, and this Chris Bledsoe got the same message from these aliens, these UAPs, these orbs, these beings that showed up in front of him, little things with big eyes, and like little alien beings he literally ran into in Lafayette. But it all came down to, hey, it's all about love. I mean, it's all about love. And then people go, well, what does that mean? And you go, well, that's a good question. What does that mean?
Right,
I,
right.
and I think it means appreciate. I learned from someone, I can't remember, but it's like appreciation, meaning like if you go, oh, like my story of that is, I grew up um, in a part of the world in a time where I was really into sort of like Earth, Wind, and Fire, the stylistics, all this like soul music, and I was like in a black neighborhood. Essentially, I was like the only white kid and so I had this really strong strong connection to that. And shoot, I kind of lost I forgot what I was gonna say. What was I saying? What was I talking
Love,
about?
love.
Yes, love. So I got to make that connection again. Why did I go there? Um, oh yes. So I, when I got to college, it was at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, surrounded by ag, and I got into horses, and I was working at a ranch, and I was kind of forced to listen to country music, which was like torture in the beginning. I was like, no, I hated it. But, I listened to it every day when I was working, cleaning out stalls and doing all this stuff. And before long, I gained an appreciation for like anything. If you focus on it long enough, anyone, any subject, anything. This also turned out to be classical music at some point for me, but it's like if you pay attention to something long enough, you develop an appreciation for it. And then that feels like love, right? Oh no, I,
Absolutely.
I love country
Absolutely.
music and I love that person that I had to work with for 5 years or whatever, right?
This is
So
actually something I love that you're bringing this in, because this is something we talk about in Buddhist teaching, especially when we're talking about mindfulness. You
ooh, tell
know,
me,
when
tell me.
we pay attention, when we rest our attention on the breath or the body, or we do a metta practice, which is like loving kindness, one of the things as you go deeper and deeper into those practices is you do start to see, attention, like real, pure, curious, open awareness and attention feels an awful lot like love. Over time, it feels like, okay, can I actually simply just hold this in loving awareness? And that's so at the heart of what happens when we go deep into silence, when we go on a long meditation retreat, is, among other things, we start to feel the way that that flavor of paying attention and that flavor of kind, open, loving awareness are, really often one and the same.
Is so cool. And it just made me think like that's like the first step. Like they say, if you can't love yourself, how can you love anyone? And it sounds like that kind of a practice helps you develop a love for your own existence, right?
Absolutely,
And
absolutely. And,
which to me is critical.
it
Wow.
really is. And I think this is actually, we're stumbling into this place here where part of what actually excites me a great deal about the merging, weaving together of shamanic practice and Buddhist meditation is that there are so many of us who come into Buddhist meditation, and there are so many layers of self criticism or perfectionism or judgment, all of these survival skills, that it's actually hard to turn that love inwards. It might be really easy to turn it outwards. It might be easy to feel it for the earth. It might be easy to feel it for all beings, but much harder to really love, forgive, accept, support ourselves. And part of where I find I work with a lot of Buddhist practitioners, bringing them into some of these shamanic practices. What I found for myself and what I found over and over for other people is that when you are able to establish a relationship with a guide through shamanic work, that there is a unconditional, unwavering, profound support in that relationship with guidance, with the earth, with the teachers we encounter in the journey, that can actually heal some of those foundational attachment wounds and make it more possible to turn that love back in towards ourselves, because we have felt and experienced and rested in that support and acceptance and like deep allyship from a guide.
That's
So
great.
it's a place where, I think there's profound opportunity here to weave these things together so that the meditators can have deeper meditation, the shamanic practitioners can pay
Right.
more attention. Like, how do we actually bridge these different worlds and see
Yeah.
the way that it's all mutually supportive?
Yeah, that's great. And it's like it brought up three things for me. One is that unconditional thing, right? Like our whether it's you think of it as God or your guides or Jesus or Buddha or anything, the key is that it's unconditional. The key is just like you and I, if someone really came up to us and said, "Can you help me? I just need help," and we'd go, "Of course," and we would help, and we wouldn't expect anything in return. Um, and we're unattached. We've done our work. If they go off with it and they use it, great. If they don't, we just don't, we don't care. There's no conditions. And so we're like that. So why wouldn't the like super enlightened non-physical beings, including God, not be like that? Like that just makes sense, right? And people I think need to really understand that because we've been taught that you don't get something for nothing. You even in religion or something, you got to pay a price. You got to light this, do this, make an offering here, do that. It's like not that may be good for your own internal like belief system or mythic body or subconscious. You do that to help get that out of the way, but they don't care. Nobody out there cares, right? So that, and then you mentioned this whole concept of the self judgment and the self, and I've talked about this. It's probably, I probably consider it one of the most important, if not the most important factor in people who seem to be getting influenced by negative energies, whether it's sorcery, demons, if you want to call it that, whatever, anything that doesn't seem to be them and yet is having a big influence on them. And where exorcism is like the pinnacle of that whole thing, in those traditions. But it's like the one thing, and I learned this in my shamanic training, is that the only way these things can get you is where you're getting yourself. So people go, "Oh, well, give me protection, give me the bell of light, or give me the things and the bands of power and the ring, call on protection from all the angels and saints." The problem is if you have 1 ounce of self judgment, guilt, shame still, it opens all that up and says, "Come and get me." So that practice you mentioned of the taking the time through the Buddhist and the meditation and anything else you do to get rid of all that, to get rid of the self, to be unconditional toward yourself, to be forgiving, to be loving enough not to at least feel guilt, shame, doubt. I think is probably the most important work people can do
It
for these
changes
reasons.
everything. It changes
Yeah.
everything. The ground
Yeah.
we stand on when we are able to actually, and of course, we are all human. I think most of us struggle with some level of self-judgment, self-criticism, the things
Totally.
that we've taken on from culture, from family, from whatever, that need to be let go of. It's a process and it's an ongoing one. I feel like if we reach a point where we say, "Oh, great, I'm perfectly healed, I'm done," well, we got another thing
Yeah.
coming
Well, there's
because
always shadow
there's
work.
always more that can be done. But,
Yeah.
it is like the ground we stand on. If we can actually care about and accept ourselves and commit to part of our journey being an ongoing discovery of how much more we can be on our own side, not in a narcissistic way, but in a
No.
humble, curious, open way, our life will change. I look at my life before this kind of work, and then I look at my life after this kind of work, so much of which has been about self acceptance and loving, this being in this human incarnation, regardless of its, flaws and challenges and struggles. The difference in, I mean, those are two profoundly different lives. Profoundly different lives with
Yeah.
so much joy, for one, and
Right.
so much
Right.
struggle in the other.
And it also makes me think of the concept that, so you think of the victim perpetrator rescuer trap, which we're trying to avoid completely anyway, but let's just put it this way: the ones who tend to cause pain and the ones who tend to receive pain. You maybe look at it more just in a pure pain thing, because even if you're the most wonderful, beautiful, kind, sweet, gentle person on the planet, you're going to cause pain, if not for just the fact that you can't be with everyone who wants to be with you. So some people who can't be with you are going to be in pain. So I don't care who you are. You may not be like a murderer or whatever. Everybody, it's all about pain and pleasure. There's contrast on the planet. Nobody's immune from causing pain or receiving pain in one form or another. But let's just take, for example, you know, people who, for whatever reason, we all know that wounds from the past and everything, like hurt people, right? So people who cause pain, um, main whether it depends. If they're narcissistic particularly, they don't care. They'll never like think it's a problem, or like I need to go do work around this, right? That's a whole nother subject. We don't. But the empaths, the people who tend to be the opposite of that, who don't want to hurt anybody, and who end up often on the receiving end. Here's the interesting thing: for people like, I'll just say, for healers, for people who's like devoted their life to helping people free and empower themselves, particularly, are hard on ourselves in terms of, I've never wanted to cause even a scintilla of pain on anything. And of course, I've done plenty of that. But it's like, we're the ones who are, I think it's hardest for us to ever be the perpetrator, if you will, right? You can knock me down, kick me, punch me, abuse me all day long, and I'm good. I'm cool. Not a problem. I won't even hold it against you. We'll be great friends. I won't play the victim, right? However, I one moment I recognized I caused pain, and I'm like going through a crisis. And that's why I think people need to understand that if you're even listening to this, if you're the kind of person that is any interested in what you and I are talking about here today, there's a very good chance you're on that side of it, that you generally don't want to do harmful things. And therefore, you're probably way more susceptible to the self-judgment, guilt, shame thing,
Yeah,
right?
this is so real. I was just with a client a day or two ago, and we were working on exactly this. She, her heart is breaking for the state of the world,
Yeah,
and there
right.
is deep, deep shame because at one point, many, many years ago, her beliefs about a certain issue were different than they are now. And she has shifted so much and is in this place of profound offering of support and help and assistance and love to all beings. But yeah, the shame of having once been standing in a place that, may have caused harm. It is so just brutally painful. And, part of what we worked on together, which I think is the path of so many of us who are healers, who are menders, who are caring for the world, is we are so open to allowing humanity to be humanity and to humanize all of what is going on and accept that, yeah, there is pain, there is trauma, there is confusion, there's greed, there's hatred, and this is influencing people who, underneath it all, for most people, there is a basic goodness. But we don't often offer ourselves that same, get out of jail free card that we
Mhm.
also are human. We also may have moments where, we cause harm. We also may make mistakes. I mean, I'll tell you what, I spent most of my life feeling deep shame and guilt for this one instance when I was a young kid. I had a best friend that I was really the protector of in a lot of ways. She was experiencing abuse, and anytime something happened, I knew it was my job to get her to my house, to get her to safety, to take care of her. And, from a very, very young age. one time I got angry. And, I'm probably 7 or 8 or something, right? Little kid. And I threw something at her. And decades later, I'm like, oh, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. We reconnected a while back, and we've been in and out of each other's lives for our entire life. We've known each other since we were 5. And I said to her, I'm so sorry. I really need to apologize. This has stayed with me since the day that it happened. That one day that I got angry at you and I threw something, and I just I just want to tell you I'm so sorry. And she was basically like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Right.
All I remember is that you were the person who believed me and protected me. And it was like, oh, wow,
Isn't
I
that
let myself
something?
stew in that,
Yeah. So what do you recommend?
decades.
Like, what would be your like bullet point recommendation? I mean, obviously people need to work with you, I believe, but it's like, what would be like for that particular subject, right? Of regret or for me, it was just being a man in a world. By the time I was 4, I realized everything was wrong the way women were treating. And I've been like mortified at that till even today. And yet here I am, like I'm in the, I am the thing that I despise most, essentially, in physical form. And of course, I have a large feminine side, and people who know me know this and stuff, but it's like, man, that's the thing. And I've seen a lot of this too, right? Because we do see, I mean, and we both, I'm sure at points in our lives before getting this training and whatnot, would look at what's going on the other side of the world and just be devastated, right? And it's still impossible not to feel pain empathetically in those situations. But what do you recommend for somebody to not be so influenced either by something they did in the past or by something they're witnessing, because the rescuer is the third part of that disempowerment triangle, right? So that's, I think, kind of what we're talking about, right? Is how do you stop it from happening? What what's the best like? And then I want to talk about hypnosis more deeply and how that works. But it's like, what would you say you would just advise people who have that tendency to be super empathetic, and it just knocks them down for days or weeks? What do you tell them? What's your wisdom, your bullet point wisdom on that?
Honestly, one of the big ones is just learn to journey, learn to journey, learn to journey, develop a
Interesting.
relationship with a guide.
Cool.
We need
Huh.
support to be able to see more deeply than our reactivity.
So like the
And
bigger picture,
yeah,
we can't judge because what seems horrible today could turn out to be the best thing that happened in the future. And the only way to notice that is to get above the trees, kind of like the
you
eagle.
know, I think some of it is we need to be able to understand that we are held in a field of power and benevolence and compassion, and that the experiences that we have fundamentally, when we take that zoom out, is these are learning experiences. And there is a concept in Buddhist practice that is I find to be very helpful. This idea of there being kind of ultimate reality and mundane reality. That there is this profound, non-ordinary place where way of understanding reality, that it is, this is all so much bigger than we can fathom, that we are all, that all of this is happening. And something about being able to connect to that also allows us to go back to the, quote unquote, mundane reality and find ways to help that are not as steeped in reactivity and attachment.
Nice.
I
Yeah.
certainly
More
wouldn't
receptive.
say, like, yeah, you know, okay, all of us, we need to help in some way, whether that's going to the protest or offering
Yeah.
the mutual aid or, working at the food bank or whatever it is. Like that is crucial to what is needed now. And part of the process that, I work with so many people who are deeply caring, deeply empathetic, at risk of kind of burning out from how much they care. And part of what is needed, and this is part of some of the teachings that are coming out from people like Lama John McCransky, Paul Condon, on sustainable compassion, that part of what we actually need is to be able to rest in a field of compassion for ourselves. And I find that, the guides, the earth, this kind of benevolent field is, the place to be, whether we're calling in the Buddha, we're calling in Kuan Yin, we're calling in Jesus, whatever it is. A lot of folks I work with
Mhm.
work with the Buddha and Kuan Yin, and they work with the Virgin Mary.
Right.
They're all
Yeah.
invited.
Yes.
And there is something here of, can we actually rest in the field of that support and that compassion and start acting from that place where we are already okay, and then move from there? And I think that really, that's going to be part of the trick of this time is, can we actually stay connected to that just ground level compassion, care that is at the core of who we are, in order to meet ourselves and meet others.
That's great. Yeah, I think sustainability is a key word there, right? I think you could do a lot of good, but if it's only for a short period of time and then you're out, like, is that really how you want to do it? It's kind of like the long game. And we're in a society noticeably where patience is not like, these, especially the new generations, and it makes sense with all the instant gratification stuff. And it's like, I've always been impatient. It's always been a struggle. And I'm pre-computer um, time, but it's like, whoo, how do you look at these events, look at the situation and go, I want to contribute, I want to help. Um, and it's going to take a lot longer than I probably think it's going to be. That was true for me. I realize that now, like when I first started doing this work or any kind of really spiritual, intense spiritual work. Like I remember reading Yogananda when I was maybe 17 or something, and it's like, and noticing, like I said, when I was 4, that the world was turned upside down with regards to women and the feminine, and that's horrible, and that needs to change. And I wanted it to change. Like I thought, okay, I'm gonna do the shaman work. This is totally dialed for that. We'll have we'll have women in power, 80/20, running the world within 10 years. This was 30 years ago, and I'm like, oh no, it's gonna take so much longer, and it's killing me, right? Because it's painful to witness and it's painful to be a part of and see, especially when you're a seer and a visionary and you have the imagination, the ability to see the actual solutions, you know, and people aren't going after that, right? They may be going after a symptom or two. And so it's frustrating, right? And patience is a thing. So yeah, I think sustainability depends largely on our ability to recognize that it's going to take maybe at least our whole lifetime and probably a couple hundred years, which is
Yeah.
insane. But it's like,
Yeah.
but, and then at the same time, that also reminds me of the concept of the unknown and the unknowable, right? Because if you don't stay humble and open, humus, right? The loamy soil that has a lot of air spaces. Humility is, recognizing I know a lot and I'm really good at a lot, but there's so much more I don't know, and that's fine. And that there's so much more I don't know, and there's so much more unknowable. So tap into that a little bit, right? And I think that's what those journeys do too, right? They get you out of your tiny little frontal lobe of data of what you think you
Yes.
know, and
Yes.
you go, whoa, I never would. And this happens in every one of my sessions. I think I've got a lot of experience, a lot of years, a lot of clients, and I can listen to somebody's story. And the old saying is a good psychologist knows there's only six problems that ever walk through their door, right? There's only six painful experiences. And so there's only sort of six variations of the same story, like movies, or there's only a few stories. But it's like, so, you can listen to somebody go, well, this probably happened and that probably, and I'll bet this happened. And I think I kind of got it figured out. And then I get into my session and I'm shaking my rattle and then all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, I didn't see that coming. I never would have imagined that happened. And wow, it has nothing to do with what I thought. And that's really good for staying humble, but it's also really good to let people know. And I think with a lot of what's going on this year, I think one of my latest messages has been, look, a lot of us feel like we've exhausted the things you can do to change. We tried voting, we tried this, we tried that. Things are just out of control. It's looking Armageddon, like there's some climate change, you name it, right? Um, and so we're feeling like, what else can I do? What else is there to do? And then I go, wait, remember, there's a huge, like, this is how much we know,
Yep.
and this is beyond how much we don't know. And that is the realm of miracles.
It is.
Right?
It really
Fundamentally,
is.
those things that nobody
Absolutely.
expected happen, that aren't
Yes.
scientifically explainable, that no one
Yes.
could have figured out. But man, remember, that's a possibility.
Yeah.
Like,
And
don't give up. Don't give up. Play the
absolutely.
long game. Stay
Right?
sustainable. Stay healthy. Stay
Yeah.
strong. Because if a miracle shows up and everything goes and changes overnight, you're going to be glad you did.
Yeah. We don't, I
Right?
mean, and that's the fundamental thing. We don't know. We
We
don't
don't
know
know.
what's
There's
going
so
to
much we
happen
don't know.
next.
Yeah.
And, I feel like there is this piece of, okay, we just have to hold down as much assistance, as much good intention, as much positive energy as we can. We have to keep showing up. We have to take care of ourselves, knowing that, yeah, this is a marathon. This is a marathon that could last beyond our lifetime. It doesn't mean that we don't keep going. We have to keep going. And the beauty of any kind of work where we're moving into altered states is that we're actually building the muscle of being able to venture into the unknown, where we have no idea what we're going to be shown, where, we might go in with an assumption of, like you shared, one thing being one way, we find out actually there's something completely different going on. And there's something about that, which is part of why I actually feel like, you know, altered state work, whether it's shamanic journey work or hypnosis or meditation, anything that allows us to let go and be in this different way of experiencing reality, experiencing our mind, experiencing the world for a period of time, it is going to benefit us because we are really, as a culture, as a species, we're hurtling headfirst into the unknown. So it would behoove us to get really comfortable with dwelling in not knowing, with dwelling in not being certain what's going to happen next, and learning how to actually navigate that uncertainty with some, relative equanimity.
Love that. And just being prepared for what happens after, I think is, we don't know what's going to happen. It could be this World War III, or it could be a miracle and peace and love. In any case, you're going to be there probably, and you need, physically or non-physically, you need to be. Every piece of work you're doing today is not for nothing. In other words, if my dream of the feminine coming back into spirit just like doesn't happen in this lifetime, it doesn't mean, just like Susan B. Anthony working really hard to get the women's vote died, the women's vote didn't come for a number of years later. Every moment of her life still made that
Yes.
possible, even though she didn't get to see it in that lifetime. So I think that's a huge point. Tell me, please, if you will, how does hypnosis work? Tell us.
Yeah. Big question. So, the hypnosis work What we're really doing, in so many ways, it's similar to a journey. Actually, one of the methods of hypnosis that I use, one modality called depth hypnosis, is actually a blend of hypnosis, shamanic wisdom, Buddhist wisdom, transpersonal psychology. And so we are going into a relaxed trance like state. And depending on how we're working, we're really pointing that capacity to be in a gentle trance like connected to non-ordinary reality to make some kind of change. And I work with folks in a real broad way. So I have people who are doing this work for spiritual emergence, deep psychospiritual work, all these different patterns, whether it's relationships or shame or fear or, any number of things. Also folks who've had meditation retreats or plant medicine experiences and they don't quite know what to make of what happened on the retreat. Often we'll work together. But also, it's an amazing tool for, helping us in a very targeted way. If you're going into work and there's that, maybe your boss, maybe your coworker, maybe some particular meeting you have to go to every week, and you find yourself like, wow, I just get real triggered. I don't really know what to make of this. This is really hard for me. We're also finding ways of, okay, how can we use hypnosis and this gentle altered state work to give you more space around the trigger or the phobia or the anxiety or whatever it is, so that you can be functioning more at your full capacity, so that you can be fully present, so that you can show up how you want to show up in the world. So, there is a really broad way of working with this, but, it's interesting because it really does work on all levels. Like, I could just as easily tell you we're doing deep energetic and spiritual work as I could tell you that we're rewiring neural pathways when we do it. Both are true. So it is something it's a very fun, very interesting modality to bring in. People have a lot of misconceptions and myths about what
Right.
hypnosis
That's why I
is,
wanted you to
right?
talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. I need a session with you ASAP
Well,
for sure.
come on by.
I'm being triggered. I'm being triggered lately. Absolutely. I'm going to sign up as soon as we're done. But the so your client is conscious essentially, and you're sort of interacting with them. You're
Yes, it
essentially
is
sort of guiding.
totally
It's like a guided journey
collaborative.
almost, right?
Exactly,
And so
exactly.
they're able to respond and tell you things, um, and yet they're tapped into the subconscious. They're tapped into parts of their consciousness that they otherwise wouldn't be able to tell a therapist and talk regular talk therapy.
Precisely. Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
You've nailed it. People often come to me because they say, I've gone to talk therapy, I've done some coaching, I've read the self-help books, whatever it is, I've done the work. I understand what's going on intellectually. I can talk about it, but it's not changing. And I need to be able to make an actual change here. I need to be able to feel more ease. I need to be able to feel less fear, whatever it is. I need to be able to feel less angry at, when I open the news so that I can keep showing up. And that really is the place where, the beauty of any kind of altered state work, anything that brings us into that trance state is only about 5% of our mind, our behaviors, our choices, our actions, our patterns, our beliefs, like 5% of that is conscious. The other
Right.
95% is
Right. Amazing.
actually
Yeah.
operating on this unspoken, embodied, subconscious level. And yet we don't
Yeah.
look into that quite as much as we could. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
this really
Even
is that
geniuses,
place.
they're even, I probably, you know, have a genius, whatever level IQ or whatever. But the point is, it's like, it's still a tiny little frontal. I don't care if it's Einstein or Elon Musk or Tesla or you name it. It's what they can talk about is really only this tiny little nugget of flesh. And, you're it, all the good stuff is in the part of the iceberg that's below the water, right? All the
Yes,
useful stuff. So
absolutely.
your client, so you're working with your client, you're doing this combination of everything, because I'm a huge fan of comprehensive sessions. If you can do it, do it. So you do this work. Part of it is the hypnosis. Um, they they realize, whoa, that's the same thing. Like, I was barking up the wrong tree. This is really the issue here, or this is what's really going on, or this is what I can do about it, or this is how I can think about it going forward now consciously, right? So you've brought the unconscious to the conscious. Now they have a new set of information or tools to make their quality of life better. Then do you give them kind of a mantra, or what do you give them for homework? How do they then take that, and their sessions over with you, they're at work, they're in that meeting, and all of a sudden, boom, it's up. What do you tell them to do? What do you give people to do?
Great question. It depends on the person and it depends on the situation. Part of the reason I love working in so many different modalities is that I'm kind of always mixing and matching to meet what's needed in the situation. For some people, it might be very specific nervous system regulation tools. What are the very subtle things that you can actually do when you're sitting in that meeting, or you're at Thanksgiving dinner with your family and that
Yeah.
uncle is there? What are the small things that you can actually be doing in the moment to de escalate your fight or flight response? So there's a lot there. I often will teach people a little bit of self hypnosis work so that they can take some of the tools that we work on together, and after a period of time also be able to use them on their own, because we know the mind works in metaphor and archetype and imagery and symbol. There's a lot that we can actually do to shift things and work with things in the moment. This can be really helpful also for physical symptoms. I work with a lot of people with chronic illness. And then with a lot of people too, because I am often at some point in my work with folks, if they're interested, I will teach them to journey, and we will do some more journey based counseling and coaching work together. Sometimes I'll give people homework journeys. And, we'll do a big piece of work and I'll say, okay, here's a half a dozen journeys that you might want to work on your own to get at some of the other angles of what's going on with this pattern, and then come back and we'll go the next step. We'll keep unpacking things.
Thank you for that. So so yeah, we have an exciting year coming up, apparently, from all indications, both
Yeah.
obvious and literal, as well as astrological, and all the things that we tend to look for. Um, so I can't think of a better time for you know one of the things I've realized for a lot of years now is there's an easy way and a hard way to do everything. There's millions of different ways to do what you and I do, probably, different cultures, different societies. You've got a lot of them in your toolbox, more than I do. And it's and people go, well, my life's pretty good. Things are going all right. Like, why should I bother to call Juliana or John, to do anything, or anyone? And you go, yeah, sure. And then things start getting difficult. Something happens, right? Either to them personally, or something's going on in the world, and sort of the rubber hits the road at that moment, right? And you will grow and learn through those crises. The hard way is just hard knocks, right? You're knocked down, you knock down, you knock down. Eventually, you figure some things out, and you do a little better next time, and you feel that's the hard way. And then the easy way is, hey, well, things are good. I'm going to do this work with Juliana. Is it Juliana or Juliana, by the way?
Juliana. Although actually you're tapping in because it's my great grandmother's name. She's Polish. It was originally Juliana.
Oh, cool, cool,
So
cool. Yeah, I wonder. I just
technically,
right.
originally it probably should have been Juliana, but
Yeah, yeah. Anyway,
yeah.
okay, good. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't getting it wrong this whole time. So people go, so I've always encouraged people, said, look, and this for anyone who's asking, and people can't hear the answer to a question they haven't asked. So we've learned that not everybody, not everybody, you don't run around just telling people, but you know, do it while things are good. Do it while your life is cruising. Like perfect time to go seek out this kind of work because you want it available when the things are going sideways. And so now when I read all the astrology and I'm looking at all the things going on in the world, and it's like, I kind of expected this, kind of knew this was coming, it naturally. Um, I am not reacting right, because I sort of expect it and I've done a ton of work and I'm ready for a crisis. I'm ready. I deal with these things. We deal with these things with our clients every day in one form or another, small scale, large scale. And so, you know, um, when the astrologist is saying, this is going to be the worst year since the Civil War, blah, 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 you're going, oh shit, like, oh no, like this, what are we going to do? How are we going to, but for folks like us or folks like our clients, it's like, yeah, it probably won't be much different than my day to day anyway. Like, in other words, we've done the work, we've dove into those dark places, we've done the shadow work, we've seen the horrors of our past lives, we've healed them, and so bring it. It's like I can handle it, right? It's
It
like the
makes it
old
easier
story.
to show up.
It does. So like do it when things are calm and easy and good because once it's already happening, sure, call your healer during the cry, but the work takes a month, 2 months, 3 months to really integrate and like begin to really change so you don't want to wait till the thing is happening right now. You really want to start to do what you can ahead of that's my experience, my advice for people. You don't have to have an existing problem to call one of us and say, help me out. Let's, do some stuff and dig for stuff that's hidden in the dark room that when that door opens, I don't want to have to deal with it the hard way. Right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think I'm going to horribly misquote this, but I think there's a Bruce Lee quote of, whatever happens when the shit hits the fan, you're going to default to your level of training. And so part of what we are doing here, all of this is training for the mind, this is training for the heart, this is training to be able to show up in dark times, to be able to show up with strength and with hope and with goodness, and to be able to, in whatever ways we choose
To act out of love instead of
yeah,
fear.
help. Yeah.
Just there's love or there's fear. If you're in fear, you can't be in love. So like face all your fears when things are really nice, and then that way you won't have to when it happens, right? You can stay in love. Anyway, that all sounds wonderful to me, and I appreciate you. And so, how do people um, start working with you?
The best thing to do is hop on my website. It's julianasloane.com. And there's a work with me button. There's some other ways. You will be able to just sign up for a 30-minute consult that's just a space for us to talk and get to know each other, answer questions, learn more about what it looks like to work together, make sure it feels like a fit.
Hmm.
And then you can hop over after that. I give folks all the information on how to schedule with me and work together. Most of the people that I work with really do choose to do, ongoing deep work because it's something that deeply supports them. I can't tell you how many therapists
Yeah.
are coming to do this work instead of traditional talk therapy. It's very interesting. Yeah, that's one way. And then another, if folks are curious about learning to meditate, learning some of the Buddhist path. I also teach online quite a bit on Zoom. There's a link on my website for my meditation groups and classes and retreats. So lots of different ways to plug in and get some tools and get some support.
That's great. So people can actually learn from you as well as working. That's wonderful because I have found over the years, and this again, I'm kind of slow on the uptake. I'm very scientific. I kind of I'm evidence based, so I don't jump too quickly to conclusions about things, and painfully so. But sometimes, but I have noticed over decades now that just about anyone in any healing profession, nurse, doctor, psychologist, lawyers, believe it or not, artists of any art, whose fundamental reason for getting into those things was, to help people make their quality of life better in one form or another, inevitably will find the place where what they're doing reaches its sort of limits and notice that and notice they want to be able to help more and inevitably will take a class in shamanism or something. In other words, I've yet to run into anyone in any of those professions that did a session with me, for example, which is also relatively comprehensive, not as much as yours by any stretch, but will go, wow, that makes sense. That's kind of cool. That I could use, like a surgeon who now takes, one of his mesas, went through the shamanic training and takes one of his mesa stones into surgery with him in his pocket. That's enough in his world, without anyone noticing. But just knowing about the deeper layers, the energy field, the mythic layer, the subconscious, as an actor, as a writer, it doesn't even matter, a painter, it just enhances their ability to do what they came to do. So if you're one of those, I'm just throwing this out there because hey, I'm just telling you what I've noticed over
Absolutely.
decades, and it'll happen to you. It's just a question of when, like, at what point will you reach that limit and go, wait, what else can I do? So, like I said, when it's all good, start taking some of those classes. Start learning this stuff. You never know how it's going to incorporate into your work. And it's been super fun for me also over these last several decades because I've worked with a lot of Hollywood folks, actors or just inadvertently singers, artists of all kinds. Um, and I really have been getting a real joy out of seeing a lot of this stuff ending up in their shows and the movies and the TV
Yeah.
series and the writings. I'm like, oh, that's great. They're touching on that thing, and it's really fun. It's been super fun. So it's no longer fringe. Let's put it that way. It's obviously what I'm sure you had this experience. I'm always like 15 years ahead of the
Yeah.
mainstream.
Totally. Totally.
like like I was preparing for, like, Civil War 15 years ago, right? Like getting
For
getting
being a
food
teenager,
together and
yeah. Right?
and and then it's
My
like nothing happened, and I'm like,
Totally.
just sell
Totally.
that.
I
And
remember my
now it's like,
dad trying to explain to me about IRAs when I was a teenager and, planning for retirement. I remember looking at him and being like, the United States isn't going to be a global economic power by the time I'm retirement age. We're going to have a total collapse of capitalism. What are you
amazing,
talking about?
amazing, yeah.
So,
So,
yeah.
so it's super fun if you're you live long enough, and I lived longer than I thought I ever would, to actually see this stuff playing out, and becoming what we always essentially prayed for. Like people would wake up and gain awareness, and hopefully the easier way than the hard way, but you know, now it's happening. And so it's like, whoa, this is wild, like, and I've always being the anti-marketer, anti-businessman just by nature. It's not in my bones. Um, Wished and hoped that there were more people and taught anyone who was asking, like, I want you to be able to do this work. I want to be able to give clients to you. I want more people doing this. I don't care if nobody comes to me anymore. I want them to go to my students, like literally. And I still feel that way. It's like the more of this level of work, like you're doing happening, um, the better chance and I think the quicker we have, to get things kind of squared away here in a slightly better way. So I think it's wonderful you're putting in, I mean, obviously your credential, your hard work, and I know what that's like. I know how it is to do this work like 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, for years. But it's like, you know, the professionalism, the way that you've set it up, the sort of the comprehensiveness, the ability to teach, to do all these things is just the best, And so I'm really glad we could have this conversation. I'm really glad anyone who knows my work or has stumbled across my work, I would definitely encourage them to work with you and learn from you, because clearly you've got this beautiful mix of all the things that, from my experience, work the best, work the most efficient, let's say, the easiest way to do it. you know, that's the best way for me to say it, actually, because there's probably no better or best, but it's like definitely if you're looking to dial this in, dial your life in, your knowledge, your healing in a efficient way, pleasant way, not so, it doesn't have to be painful. Um, yeah, I think you've really got a great thing going. So
Thank you
honored
so much.
to have met you. I definitely want to do some work, and so I'll look into that. And yeah, if is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
I think we covered it, but just gratitude and a lot of joy to get to spend this time together. I'm so
Yeah,
looking forward to continuing to be in touch. It's always a treat to drop in with someone like this and be like, oh, here is a long lost friend. Great.
thank
So,
you. I
yeah.
appreciate that. All right. Well, I'll we'll sign off, and clearly I will put links and everything to your website on the descriptions of all of this, and so people should be able to find you easily. And I would say to folks, um, pay close attention to what they used to say, watch this space. Pay close attention to Juliana. Because I know from what you told me and your attitude towards things, that you will only continue to uh, add to your your work, right? And your gifts and your reach. And I think you're a really valuable, you know, uh, resource for people in all these realms. So I would encourage people to keep an eye out, keep an eye on all your stuff. So, all right. Well, take care.
You too. Be
And
well.
you too.